The story starts as a soldier cuts off the main lead's hair and takes her to the scaffold, where all eyes are fixed on her as she is brought forward. The soldier shouts, "The sinner Aristia La Monique, the queen, engaged in immoral activities out of jealousy and envy, and has committed treason by daring to assassinate the emperor." Aristia thinks, "When did things begin to go wrong, I wonder?" The soldier continues loudly, "As such, she will be deposed the position of queen. The fortune, title, and land of Marquis Monique will all be confiscated. As for punishment for attempting to murder a royal and such, she will be executed." Aristia wonders in fear, "Why am I here?" The soldier then says again, "She will be executed." Aristia's thoughts break in pain, "My only sin was loving you." The soldier pushes her forward and forces her head onto the guillotine, and in that moment she is shocked as she sees the king and the princess together, watching her execution without emotion, and she lets out a bitter laugh, thinking, "You were the only purpose in my life, and yet I was only a bother to you." The soldier shouts once more, "Execute her," and Aristia thinks desperately, if I could begin my life again, I won't love you again." And suddenly the blade of the guillotine falls, cutting everything away, and in that final moment the narration echoes, "Aristia La Monique, a woman born for the emperor, the emperor's one and only wife, the flower of the empire. Such was once my name." Now the coronation of Rublus Camaludin Shana Castina, the 34th emperor of the Castina Empire, had begun, and the crowd shouted loudly, "Long live the emperor! Long live the empress! Long live the emperor! Long live the empress!" As Aristia stood among them, watching silently and thinking that they truly looked like a match made in heaven, both appearing so happy, and that the empire would surely prosper now that the emperor had finally met his empress. And later in the empress palace, Jun excitedly approached Aristia and said, "Wow, I've never seen silver hair before. It's so pretty. What's your name?" To which Aristia calmly replied, "My name is Aristia La Monique, dear Empress, Moon of the Empire," and Jun smiled brightly, saying, "So you're Aristia. Can I call you Tia? Nobody here is around my age, so I don't have any friends." "This is great. Nice to meet you, Tia," while Aristia responded politely, "I am honored, Your Majesty," even though she thought to herself that among nobles only close friends use given names, and despite taking etiquette lessons, Jun still did not understand such basic manners, yet Jun continued cheerfully, saying, "My name's Jun. I hope we can be good friends." And Aristia replied, "Yes, Your Majesty," but Jun insisted, "Don't call me like that. You can just call me by my name casually." As Aristia quietly reflected that the position Jun held should have been hers, recalling the long history of the Castina Empire, which had lasted 1,000 years, and how the 33rd emperor, Mirkan Lu Shana Castina, had been a perfect and generous ruler, with his only flaw being the lack of an heir, until he finally had a son late in life, and 4 years later, an oracle foretold the birth of that prince's destined partner, leading to the birth of a daughter in House Monique, the only Marquis family that had contributed to the empire's founding, leaving no doubt that she was the chosen one, and from the moment she could walk, she was trained strictly to become empress without any freedom, and after Emperor Mirkan passed away, Prince Ruvlus ascended as the 34th emperor, and the girl waited, believing she would soon become his empress. But everything changed suddenly when a mysterious girl appeared at the lake of the royal palace, with black hair like soot and pitch-black eyes. Clearly someone from another world, throwing the temple into chaos until a new interpretation of the oracle declared her as the emperor's true partner, and so the mysterious girl was worshipped as the empress, while the girl who had trained her entire life was instead brought into the palace as a lower queen. And later, as Aristia wandered alone in the garden, she thought about how she used to walk there with the late emperor, now visiting alone without him, recalling his gentle voice calling her "my dear girl," and thinking how she once believed she would become his son's wife and be happy, softly lamenting how much she missed him, when suddenly Jun appeared and called out Tia, causing Aristia to panic internally, wondering why she was there. And when Jun asked, "What's wrong?" Aristia composed herself and said, "Welcome, Your Majesty, dear moon of the Empire." But Jun looked concerned and asked, "Were you crying? Did something happen?" To which Aristia replied, "It's nothing. I was just remembering something dear to me," prompting Jun to softly repeat, "Something dear? I see. I want to see my family too. I was just dropped into this world somehow without any warning," making Aristia realize that Jun must have had a family as well, thinking about how she had just turned 18, as Jun tearfully murmured, "Mom, Dad," and as Aristia began to respond, saying, "Your ma." They were suddenly interrupted when Ruv arrived and demanded, "What's going on here?" And Jun immediately ran to him, crying, "Ruv," as she grabbed onto him, and he gently asked, "What's wrong, Jun?" before turning sharply to Aristia and accusing, "You, what have you done to Jun?" As Aristia tried to respond, "Your Majesty, I," but Jun quickly defended her, shouting, "Ruv, Tia didn't do anything wrong," and then explaining softly, "I was tearing up a bit because I miss my family back home," which made Ruv relax slightly as he said, "I see. You must be tired. You should go ahead and rest indoors. I'll be right with you." And Jun agreed, saying, "All right," while Aristia silently noticed his gentle tone, realizing he had never spoken to her that way before. But as soon as Jun left, Ruv's expression turned cold as he warned Aristia, "You, don't you dare approach Jun. Jun is a pure, gentle woman. The likes of you shall not dare treat her carelessly." And Aristia tried to explain, saying, "Your Majesty, did you think the crown of the Empress was yours? Never. The prophecy was misinterpreted to begin with. It wasn't yours in the first place. It was Jun's. I was only trying to understand how she felt," but Ruv cut her off coldly, saying, "If this happens again, I will not forgive you," leaving Aristia alone with her thoughts as she questioned why he hated her so much, thinking that she had only ever tried her best to earn his love, and wondering painfully why it was never enough. Now Jun apologizes desperately, saying she is sorry, repeatedly calling out Tia's name, her voice filled with guilt, while Aristia looks at her calmly and says that she does not understand what she means, addressing her as Her Majesty. Though deep inside she wonders if this is about how she has been doing all the work in the palace that should have been Jun's responsibility, or about her unsophisticated etiquette that has not improved despite countless lessons. And as Jun hesitates, she explains that she heard Aristia was supposed to be the Empress, chosen as Ruv's fiancé since birth, and that everything changed when she arrived, while Aristia internally mocks how slow she is to learn the truth. And Jun insists she truly did not know and apologizes again, but Aristia calmly tells her there is no need to apologize, saying they were simply foolish and misinterpreted the oracle, which confuses Jun, prompting Aristia to explain that only God can decide who stands beside the Emperor, and since Jun is the one foretold, it is only right that she becomes the Empress. Yet Jun reacts in disbelief, questioning what is so great about being Empress, leaving Aristia stunned as Jun continues, saying she was suddenly thrown into a world she knows nothing about, overwhelmed by talk of oracles and marriage, admitting she accepted it only because she had no way to return home, but now she has learned Rove already had a fiancé, repeating loudly that she never wanted any of this and only wants to go back home, never wishing to be an empress at all, which makes Aristia internally question how someone can be so careless, before she finally asks if Jun is done, and when Jun softly calls her name, Aristia slams the table and scolds her harshly, saying she is shocked by how irresponsible she sounds, criticizing her for accepting such a position without truly understanding its weight, declaring that the Empress is the mother of the entire empire and the sole partner of the Emperor who will shape its future, and that such a role is not something to complain about so lightly, while inside, Aristia burns with frustration, thinking how she herself always wanted that position but could never have it despite dedicating her entire life to standing beside him, and as Jun weakly calls her again, Aristia admits it maddens her to see how careless she is, saying she pities the Emperor, the people, and most of all herself for wasting her youth preparing only to become worthless, reduced to assisting someone like her as a lower queen, glancing at June and wondering why Ruv chose someone like her, while June, hurt, wonders what he ever saw in Aristia before she tries to explain herself, saying she was confused after suddenly arriving in a strange world, struggling to accept that Ruv, the only person she relied on, already had another wife. And that person was Aristia, her friend, admitting that may be why she said something she should not have, apologizing once more before quietly leaving, and as the door closes, Aristia reflects on her own behavior, wondering why she could not hold back. Noticing how impatient and angry she has become lately, forcing herself to focus on work, reminding herself that these documents should be authorized by the Empress who enjoys privilege and love yet ignores her duties, when suddenly Ruv bursts into the room. And Aristia immediately greets him respectfully, calling him the sole son of the Empire, but without warning, he slaps her hard across the face and demands to know what she said to June, accusing her of claiming she was supposed to be the Empress. To which Aristia firmly replies never, but he angrily questions why June is in tears and sent him to her, leaving her struggling to respond, while internally she reflects that although she once blamed June and pitted herself, she has never truly thought of Ruv as hers, not even before June appeared, since he was never kind to her, so how could she wish for something like that now? Yet Ruv coldly asks if she wants to become his woman that badly, confusing her, as he continues, saying it cannot be for love since she is too bitter and cold to even cry when struck, and not for loyalty either since her family is already thriving, suggesting instead that she wants to bear the future emperor to continue her family's legacy. And as those words hit her, she breaks down, covering her face as tears fall, thinking desperately that despite never being loved, she only ever wanted to love him and support him, never once seeing this as duty or politics. But Ruv steps closer, grabbing her hand and commanding her to strip, shocking her as her eyes widen, while he coldly questions why she is surprised, saying this is what she wanted, and if she desires to be his woman so much, then he will make her so. Now in that moment, she sorrowfully shouts, "Your Majesty, don't do this. Your Majesty, please." But he coldly responds, "Why are you pretending to hesitate now? Isn't this what you wanted?" Leaving her trembling as she says, "I do not understand," while inside, her thoughts begin to spiral as she recalls overhearing rumors that the Emperor had never once stepped into the Empress chambers, that he was being rejected. And she wonders if that is true. Then what would happen if she accepted him now, thinking that maybe, just maybe, he would begin to look her way again, and if she were to conceive his child, perhaps he would finally acknowledge her, and, gathering her resolve, she says, "I may not be the Empress. However, I am not a mistress either, I am a queen. I will take these clothes off myself, so please respect my wishes." But he only smiles mockingly and replies, "A queen? Not a mistress? Make no mistake," before pushing her away and declaring, "You are nothing to me." And in that painful moment, she realizes that the future she had always imagined, the day she would become one with him, was nothing like this, not like this at all, as she cries out, "Kaya, Your Majesty." Wait, but he silences her, saying, "I'll do as you wish, so be quiet," before forcing intimacy upon her, and 2 months later, a grand banquet is held to celebrate June's 1-year anniversary since arriving in the Empire, where Aristia stands quietly, thinking to herself, in the end, Tia, I'm sorry, as if speaking to June in her heart, confessing, "I've fallen in love with Ruv. At first, I rejected his words of love because of you, but in the end I couldn't help but fall in love with someone as kind as him. I will take him in once this banquet is over. But I'll treasure you like my own little sister for the rest of my life. Let's be friends, just like sisters." Okay. Yet, even as she thinks this, she wonders if her endless longing for him will fade once June finally accepts him, questioning what kind of woman she has become, unable to even hate him despite the way he hurts her and looks at her coldly every time, yet still yearning for his love, whispering in her heart that she does not understand, when suddenly she gasps, feeling a wave of nausea wash over her, wondering why she feels so sick when she has not even eaten anything as a maid approaches in concern and says, "Your Highness, are you feeling ill? You seem pale," to which Aristia tries to reassure her, "Oh, I'm all right. I'm just feeling a bit." But before she can finish, she suddenly vomits, her body trembling as she thinks, "I feel so nauseous. It's like my insides are turning over." But I didn't even eat anything. As the crowd begins whispering and murmuring, their gazes fixed on her, making her uneasy as she wonders why they are looking at her like that and if something is wrong. When Ruv approaches and asks, "Is something wrong?" and she quickly replies, "It's nothing, Your Majesty." Nothing is WR, but she is interrupted again as another wave of sickness overtakes her and she vomits once more, causing Ruv to look confused, while Aristia panics internally, thinking, "No, I don't want him to see me in such a state." But when suddenly Ras steps forward and announces, "Congratulations, Your Majesty," leaving Ruv puzzled as he asks, "Sir Ras, what do you mean by that?" And Ras explains, "Though I may be hasty, it seems that the queen is with a child. That is a blessing to this empire and to the royal family. It's only right to congratulate such a blessing, is it not?" Causing the crowd to erupt into shocked whispers, saying, "She's pregnant? The Empress is right there, yet she got pregnant first, then she could," while Aristia stands frozen, her mind echoing, "I am, with a child, with his," when suddenly June cries out loudly, "New," and Ruv immediately turns to her in alarm, calling Jun. "Jun, are you all right?" as she responds shakily, "Your Majesty." Now as Aristia and June face each other once again, Ruv gently says, "Here, Jun, stand up," while Aristia tries to speak, saying, "Hear me, dear queen," but Ruv continues calmly, "To think that I'd hear news of your child on such a memorable day as today. This is quite a blessing," and hearing that soft tone, Aristia is momentarily shaken, thinking how gentle his voice sounds, yet at the same time realizing that he is not speaking his true feelings at all, noticing how cold his eyes really are as the crowd surrounds them with cheers, shouting, "Congratulations, Your Majesty! Congratulations! Your Highness the Queen! Congratulations!" And Ruv then turns to her and says, "You don't seem so well. Would it not be better for you to return to your chamber and rest now?" To which Aristia lowers her gaze and replies, "Yes, Your Majesty." "Then I shall take my leave," and Ruv adds, "I should be walking you out, but the guest of honor shouldn't leave his place. I shall send a doctor to look over your health and see you afterward. Do take care of yourself," making Aristia realize in her heart that he is clearly banishing her, yet she still answers politely, "I am grateful, Your Majesty." And later that night, a servant visits her room and says, "You must let yourself rest since this is only the beginning of your pregnancy. This tea will help you feel better and less nauseous," while Aristia sits quietly, thinking that she truly has a child, recalling how she had assumed her fatigue was simply from overworking, now realizing there is a baby inside her, and remembering the dream she once had that even if he hated her, he might look at her again if she carried his child, now recognizing it was nothing more than a naive and foolish dream. As she reflects on the late emperor who had reveled in life and must have been lonely in his youth, yet the reality now is different, recalling his words, "I will see you afterward," and calling herself a fool for waiting so hopefully when she knows he only said that because others were watching, and days pass into weeks. Until one rainy night, as she walks alone through the gallery, she thinks that 3 weeks have passed since the banquet, and he has not come to see her even once. Yet today he finally called for her, and even that small thing is enough to make her feel happy, despite her weak condition, as she suddenly feels nauseous again, wondering if it is because of the rain, when Ruv stands by the window, looking outside, and a maid announces, "Your Majesty, Her Highness the Queen has arrived." And Aristia enters respectfully, saying, "I am here as requested, Your Majesty, the sole son of the Empire," but Ruv speaks coldly, "I don't wish to speak with you for long, so I'll be brief. I don't suspect that the child in your belly is not mine." "You wouldn't do that," judging by your high sense of pride, and as she tries to steady herself, telling herself to remain calm and not show anything disgraceful, he continues, however, keep this in mind. I will choose my heir from among the children of the Empress, not you. It doesn't matter how many children you bear, nor how smart they grow to be. They will never become my heir or successor. Do you understand? And his cold voice feels like it is cutting through her very bones, leaving her unable to respond immediately as she wonders why he hates her so much, feeling her heart ache, until she finally forces herself to say, yes, but suddenly she staggers, crying out, as her body gives way and Rove instinctively catches her from behind, and in that brief moment, she is surprised, thinking she has never seen him like that before, but just then the door bursts open and Jun enters, saying, Rove, I got tired of waiting, so I came to you. Today is only to freeze as she sees them together and angrily demands, what are you doing? And Rove quickly tries to explain, Jun, but she cuts him off, shouting, how could both of you do this to me? As he insists, Jun, this isn't what you think. Yet she refuses to listen, yelling, I don't care, before turning and heading toward the door, and Rove urgently calls out, wait. Jun, please listen to me. Jun, as he lets go of Aristia to chase after her, causing Aristia to collapse onto the floor, and in that instant, he turns back in shock, saying, what? Queen, as she cries out in pain, my belly, feeling as though her stomach is being torn apart, thinking how unbearable the pain is, while Rove shouts in panic, is there anyone outside? Call the doctor here. Now, and as everything blurs, Aristia wonders faintly why he looks so panicked, questioning why he is acting this way when it is so unlike him. Now, as Aristia lies in bed, she slowly wakes up, her vision blurred as she quietly thinks morning. Just like any other day, but why do I feel so empty? And just then, a maid enters and gently says, are you awake, Your Highness? And at that moment, the memories of the previous night suddenly come rushing back to her, making her fall back onto the bed as she whispers weakly, did I lose my baby? And the maid lowers her head and replies, I'm afraid so, Your Highness, causing Aristia to grip the blanket tightly as she thinks to herself that she had expected as much, while the maid apologizes sincerely, saying, I am so very sorry, Your Highness, and Aristia reflects that there had been too much blood for it to be otherwise, before hesitantly asking, then, will I be able to bear another child? To which the maid struggles to respond, saying, that's because you were always quite frail in health since you were young, Your Highness, and hearing that, Aristia quietly understands, thinking that she will never be able to have a child with him now or ever again. Yet even as that realization settles in, she recalls Rove's voice from the previous night shouting, attend to the queen. Jun, wait, let me, and convinces herself that perhaps this outcome is for the better, thinking that it is better for a child not to be born from someone as stubborn as her. Yet what hurts her even more than losing the child is the image of him turning his back on her. Accepting that maybe he was right about her being a cold and unfeeling woman, while outside, maids whisper among themselves, one saying, the queen is in such a state, yet her father Marquis Monique hasn't even come to see her. He only goes back and forth from the knight's quarters, and another replies, well, of course. House Monique has always been fiercely loyal to the royal palace. As the first continues, he didn't show any discontent when his daughter was called to be the queen. It's a humiliation after all the years she was trained as an empress, and the other questions. Does he not care about his daughter? Only for the first to repeat the same doubt, while the second coldly concludes, I guess ice flows in the veins of that family instead of blood. And hearing all of this, Aristia wonders how much time has passed since then, feeling as though another nightmare has fallen upon her even before she could recover. Unable to sleep as her insomnia worsens, deciding she should return to work since there must be a pile of tasks waiting for her, but as she approaches the door, she overhears the maids again, one whispering, hey, did you hear the news? And another asking, is it true? To which the first excitedly replies, it is. I heard the head maid talking about it, and Aristia freezes as she realizes what they are about to say, thinking, The Empress is with a child. Jun is pregnant. As the maid continues enthusiastically, I heard that the Emperor was so very delighted. They're going to hold a grand banquet and offer gifts to all the people of the empire. Even the temples are holding a prayer to bless the child of the prophesied Empress. Amazing! The empire will finally welcome an heir to the throne. And hearing this, Aristia reflects bitterly that when she had a child, there were no celebrations and no one rejoiced, and suddenly she bursts into loud laughter, saying, "Ha ha 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 ha, nobody," alarming the maids as they cry out, "Your Highness! Your Highness! Please forgive us," but Aristia, overwhelmed, shouts, "Pregnant! She's pregnant! Sojun has a child, does she?" As the maids plead with her to calm down, until suddenly the door bursts open and her father rushes in, shouting, "My dear queen, is something wrong?" And in a broken tone, Aristia repeats his words mockingly before saying, "I won't ever have a child from now on. But look, she's pregnant. How funny. Don't you think so, father?" As she continues laughing uncontrollably, and he quickly approaches her, grabbing her shoulders and shouting, "Please, get a hold of yourself, Your Highness," causing her to freeze as she realizes her behavior and apologizes. "What was I? Please forgive me for showing such disgrace, father," while thinking that despite all her training to control her emotions, she has failed and must have disappointed him, knowing how strict and unwavering he has always been. Yet to her shock, he says, "I should never have sent you here," making her stare in confusion as she realizes he has never once opposed the royal palace before. Wondering what he means as he continues seriously, "Your Highness, please listen closely. I have to travel to the borders due to an urgent matter. So please stay strong and wait for me. When I return, I will surely take you back to our Monique family home." And hearing those words, she hesitantly asks, "Is that really true? Father, can I really return home?" And he reassures her firmly, "I will definitely make it so. So please ready yourself and stay well. Do you understand?" Filling her with a rare sense of happiness as she replies, "Yes, yes, father," while he prepares to leave. And as she watches him go, she feels both comforted and uneasy, thinking about how he has always been stern yet is now showing concern, wondering why he feels so distant. Briefly considering calling him back, but deciding to trust that he will return as he always keeps his promises, resolving to ask him when he comes back if he truly considered her more important than the empire he always prioritized. But before she can dwell further on that thought, chaos suddenly erupts elsewhere as a scream echoes, "Kaya, who are you? Who ordered you to do this?" And Aristia later learns that Joan was ambushed by masked men during a walk outside the palace grounds, an incident that occurred just 4 days later, followed by desperate cries of "Your Majesty" echoing through the scene. Now everything begins to fall apart when a maid suddenly rushes in, shouting, "Your Highness, this is an emergency. Marquis Monique was arrested for treason," and hearing this, Aristia cries out in shock, "My father," as her mind races, recalling how Jun had been attacked by unknown men during her excursion into town and lost her child, and how the very next day, her father was accused as the mastermind behind the attack, making her desperately think that it cannot be true, that her father is a loyal man who would never do such a thing, and without hesitation, she rushes to Rouve and pleads, "Your Majesty, please spare my father. I beg you," but he coldly responds, "You're asking me to forgive someone who tried to kill the Empress," and she insists, "There must be some sort of misunderstanding. Father would never do such a thing. Please, think of the countless years our house has been loyal to the throne. Please spare his life." Yet instead of compassion, Rouve simply smiles and says, "Really?" Neil, leaving her stunned as she asks, "What?" But he continues mercilessly, "Didn't you want to save your father? Kneel at my feet and lay your head on the ground. Lick my shoe and I shall spare your father. Well, you can't do it." And in that moment, Aristia is torn, thinking about how she was raised her entire life to be an empress, taught to stand beside the emperor as his equal, to carry pride and dignity greater than anyone else. Certain that her father would never want her to humiliate herself like this, yet at the same time remembering how he had finally shown her genuine fatherly love and promised to take her home, and as those emotions overwhelm her, she resolves that none of her pride or dignity matters anymore, deciding that she will save her father no matter what, and so she kneels before him, while Rove looks down at her and says, "You were always arrogant, and now I finally see you kneel," and with a trembling voice, she asks, "Will you spare my father's life as promised?" But he coldly replies, "Oh, how unfortunate. Your father is already dead. He was executed this morning," and in that instant, her world shatters as she realizes that the last time she saw him was truly the final moment, while Rove continues cruelly, "Did you really think I would let him live? He killed my child and hurt Jun," and hearing those words, Aristia's heart breaks completely as she reflects that she had never longed for her father's love until that very last moment when she finally felt a glimmer of it, only for it to be taken away forever. And in her despair, she looks at Rove and says, "You say my father killed your child. Then what about you? You took away my everything, you killed my child, and left me with nothing. So what about you?" As her anger boils over and she shouts, "How dare you?" shocking him as he reacts, "What?" But she screams again, "How dare you?" before grabbing a sharp pin from her hair and lunging at him, striking him as he cries out in pain. While the servants panic, shouting, "Your Majesty! Your Majesty! Your wound is. Hurry, call for the doctor. The rest of you, arrest the queen now," and as she is seized, Aristia's mind spirals in horror, thinking, "No. What have I done? What's happened to me?" And soon after, her fate is sealed as a soldier announces, as such, she will be deposed from the position of queen. As for punishment for attempting to murder a royal and such, she will be executed, and in her final moments, as everything fades, Aristia thinks to herself that if she could begin her life again, she would never love him again, and with that final thought, the blade of the guillotine falls, bringing a tragic end to her life. Now in the darkness, a mysterious voice echoes, saying, "You are the one who I look upon. The path you take will be your fate, and what you wish for will be your path. The one who carves one's own fate, that is your name. Your name is," and before the words can finish, she suddenly wakes up, her eyes opening to a familiar ceiling, noticing a silver shield, the insignia of her house, and wondering why it is there, thinking how strange it feels. Realizing that this scene is just like before, as she slowly rises and pulls the curtain aside, looking outside only to be stunned as she sees the mansion of House Monique, questioning what is going on since she had left home at 16, wondering why she is here now. When a maid enters and says, "Are you awake?" "Good morning, Lady Tia," and hearing that voice, Aristia shouts in shock, "Lena. How are?" But Lena casually replies, "Oh no, look at you. Your hair is a mess. You're already 10 now, were you not able to fall asleep?" And those words leave Aristia frozen as she looks at herself and whispers, "What?" 10 years old, while her mind spirals in disbelief, recalling that she was executed for treason, immediately thinking of her father as she urgently asks Lena, "What about father?" And Lena answers, "The Marquis. He is usually in the training hall at this hour." "Oh, Lady Tia. You're still wearing your pajamas." But Aristia wastes no time, rushing out in desperation as servants greet her in confusion, while she runs with a single thought in mind, that she has to see him, to confirm that he is safe. Not caring whether this is a dream or reality, and as she reaches him, she shouts, "Father," and the Marquis turns in surprise, saying, "Tia," while Aristia recalls how he had always been loyal to the throne, putting the empire above everything. Yet, in his final moments, he chose her above all else, and overwhelmed with emotion, she runs into his arms, crying out, "Papa, Papa," thinking with relief that he is alive, repeating his name as tears fall, while he stands there shocked and those around them grow concerned. And later, as Lena combs her hair, she says, I was so surprised to think that the daughter of the Marquis, the young lady who is the epitome of etiquette, would run outside in her pajamas in the morning. Nobody would believe it unless they saw it with their own eyes. Did you have a nightmare?" And Aristia quietly thinks that perhaps it was a nightmare, though it felt far too real, as Lena continues, You will begin your lessons as the Empress soon, making Aristia realize that Lena looks much younger now. Just as she herself does, noticing her small hands and suddenly panicking as she recalls her earlier behavior, while Lena asks, "What's wrong?" and Aristia internally panics, thinking about how she cried in her father's arms in front of everyone, feeling utterly embarrassed, wondering how she can face him again, until later when he calls her, saying, "Come here," and she approaches nervously, apologizing, "I'm sorry for being late, Father," as she sits at the table filled with dishes. Feeling awkward and noticing that he seems a bit strange, wondering if her behavior upset him, asking hesitantly, Father, are you feeling uncomfortable anywhere?" But he calmly replies, "No, it's nothing at all," making her question if she imagined it, as he then says, Tia, and when she responds, yes, he hesitates, "Well, it's about," before trailing off awkwardly, adding, "Why don't you call me like B? I mean, you called me. It's nothing. Continue with your meal." And hearing this, Aristia feels a quiet happiness, thinking that her father is alive, that they are speaking and eating together, wishing that if this is a dream, it would never end, even if it means she must sleep forever. But suddenly, memories of Ruv's cruel words echo in her mind. Make no mistake. "You're nothing to me. Your child will never be my heir. Your father is dead. He was executed this morning," causing her to jolt back to reality in fear, her heart racing as she looks at herself in the mirror and begins to cry, overwhelmed by everything that has happened. Now the next morning, Lena enters Aristia's room and gently says, "It's time for your tea soon. Should I bring it to your room?" But Aristia quietly replies, "No. I'll go downstairs," surprising Lena as she asks, "You will?" And as Aristia walks, she thinks about how after wandering through those cruel memories, she opens her eyes to see the people she missed, and as Lena happily points out, "There's your favorite today, meringue pie." Aristia looks around and thinks about the home she longed for, while Lena fusses over her, saying, "You're too thin, Lady Tia. You must eat more," and Aristia softly responds, "Is that so?" as she reflects on these warm, peaceful days, wondering which is the dream and which is reality, questioning how long this happiness will last, and as she heads toward the door and opens it, she sees her father preparing to leave, saying to a servant, "I may be late, so don't worry about my supper," and she immediately calls out, "Father, are you leaving?" To which he replies, "Yes. I must visit the palace," and she protests, "What? But you don't need to work today." Yet he explains, "I have something urgent to discuss with Duke Arkant," and though she nods, saying, "I see," he suddenly approaches her and asks with concern, "Tia, are you not feeling well?" catching her off guard as she stammers, "Huh." While he continues, "Or do you have something to say to me? You suddenly broke into tears last time, as well," and flustered, she replies, It's nothing. I'm not sick at all." Father, while thinking about how he is making that expression again, and after a brief pause, he says, "Really? Well, if you say so," and as she watches him leave, she says, "Take care, Father," but he quietly responds, "So you won't call me like that anymore," confusing her as she says, "Huh," before he simply adds, "I'll be back soon," and leaves, while Aristia reflects on how they used to be distant, sharing only necessary formalities, yet now he feels different, remembering how he awkwardly patted her head and how she could feel his warmth even through his gloves, making her wonder if her life had been so pitiful that God granted her one last dream, and suddenly she recalls the Temple of Vita, the ruling god of the empire, realizing that perhaps the temple and its oracles might hold the answers she seeks, deciding she should go there the next day, and that night, as she sleeps, the Marquis quietly enters her room and moves the bed curtain, causing her to wake in fear, clutching her blanket tightly as she thinks it is too dark to see anything, questioning where she is and whether this is the palace or somewhere else, until she feels a hand and cries out, "Who's there?" only to hear his gentle voice say, "Tia, it's me," and instantly she relaxes, calling out, "Father, Papa, Papa, Papa," as he reassures her, "You must have had a bad nightmare," while she wonders if it truly was just a nightmare, unable to tell which reality is real anymore, yet holding on to the warmth she feels, not wanting to lose it, as he says, "I should go with you." But she insists, "I'm all right." "You must be busy, father," though he replies firmly, "You had trouble falling asleep last night. I can't send you to the temple alone," and later, as she sits in the carriage, she tells him, "Don't worry. I'll be careful," while thinking about how he held her hand until she fell asleep, still uncertain which reality is true, wondering if those memories were a dream of the future, and if so, whether there is an unknown oracle tied to it. And eventually she arrives at the great temple, Sanctus Vita, where a temple lady greets her, saying, "May you be blessed with life. Please announce your name and the purpose for your visit," and Aristia answers, "I am Aristia La Monique. I wish to read any oracles from the past few months, only to be told there is nothing as such." The oracle from 5 years ago was the most recent one, leaving her troubled as she thinks about what to do next, before deciding, "Then I would like to read all the oracles from the past 10 years, and the temple lady agrees, saying, "I will show you to the prayer room," leading her inside, where Aristia searches through everything but finds nothing that explains her situation, realizing that in her memory she was 17, while now she is 10, meaning 7 years passed in what could have been a single dream, yet questioning if that is even possible since the pain, the cold glances, and the suffering still feel as vivid as yesterday, making her wonder if she is the one dreaming right now instead, until she sighs and asks herself, "Phew, what should I do now?" And just as she stands there in uncertainty, a voice suddenly echoes, "You are here, my child," startling her as she looks around in shock. Now as the mysterious voice echoes, Aristia shouts in alarm, "Who are you? Who's talking to me right now?" And the voice calmly responds, "I am the one who imbues life into all. You all call me Vita," leaving her shaken as she wonders if this could be real or just some cruel trick. But Vita continues, "You wish to know which is the truth between yourself now and yourself when you were 17, making her stammer, "How did you?" While Vita declares that nothing can escape its gaze and reveals that both are her reality, causing her to question in disbelief how that is even possible, asking if it means she traveled back in time, to which Vita confirms that it turned back the time of everything using its power of life, and confused and angry, she demands to know why, only to hear that too many fates had been distorted by its blessed child, leaving her puzzled as she repeats, "A blessed child." And Vita explains that this child was meant to be born in this world, but fell into another world due to a distortion, and when brought back, it twisted the fate of many, including hers, and in that instant, Aristia realizes the truth, thinking that June is that blessed child, and she questions why no new oracle was given, thinking that if she had known earlier, she might have given up everything sooner. But Vita reveals that when the blessed child disappeared, Aristia's own thread of fate became tangled with roofs to fill that void, and as the realization sinks in, she trembles, asking if that means her connection to him was never truly hers, only a replacement, and Vita confirms it, causing her to break down as she shouts that her painful love was not even her own will, that it was merely decided by fate, and Vita again confirms it without hesitation, making her cry out in anguish that she worked so hard only to never be loved, all because she was just a temporary substitute, questioning if her entire existence was nothing more than a replacement for the blessed child loved by God. And hearing yet another confirmation, she explodes in anger, shouting not to be toyed with, accusing the god before her of letting her suffer while someone else had everything, questioning how a god who claims to treat all life equally could interfere so cruelly. But Vita simply states that humans cannot avoid the decisions given to them, that it is called fate, yet Aristia refuses, shouting that she will not accept such a fate, even as Vita insists that fate cannot be avoided, and in her heart, she reflects on everything she endured, how she truly loved him despite his coldness, how she carried out all the duties of an empress, endured the scorn of the people, and convinced herself that God was testing her and would reward her someday, only to realize now that she never had any freedom at all, that her entire life was forced by fate, even being denied the warmth of her father's love. And though Vita says it pities her and offers her a gift as compensation for her twisted fate, she laughs bitterly through her tears, accepting it but rejecting the god itself, shouting that she will never acknowledge or thank it, that she will reject it with her entire life just as she was discarded. And Vita calmly accepts her defiance, telling her to do as she wishes, and suddenly crystals form around her and shatter as Vita declares, "You are the one who I look upon. You are the one who refuses fate. The path you take shall be your fate, and what you wish for will be your path. The one who carves one's own fate, that is your name." Aristia La Monique, and as those words echo, Aristia is left questioning what she lived her life for, what her existence even meant, feeling as though she was nothing in the end, until distant voices begin to call out to her, repeating Tia, 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 as she grows irritated, thinking she has nothing left to give, that her effort, pride, tears, and love were all rejected, wondering what more anyone could possibly want from her, when suddenly the voice becomes clear and urgent. Shouting Tia, and Ruv's desperate voice breaks through as he pleads, "Please, please, open your eyes," while in his heart he desperately begs for her to wake up. Tina and the Marquis shouted, "Tia, Tia, Tia, wake up, Tia, Lady Tia, you're awake," and Aristia slowly opened her eyes as she called out Father. Lena, her father, who had always been stern, looked at her with visible emotion as he said, "You're finally awake," and she was shocked to see tears in his eyes, thinking tears. "My father, who was always so stern," while Tina cried out, "I'm so relieved, Lady Tia. I was so surprised to hear that you collapsed at the temple," and both of them continued, "We thought something was terribly wrong since you didn't wake up for such a long time." As Aristia realized the truth, thinking, "That's right, I'm not alone. Now I have my father who loves me enough to abandon his duties, and Lena, whom I've been with since I was young, and the people from my family who worry about me. I have people around me who will hold my hand if I reach out. I don't need to yearn for God's salvation." All I had to do was look around, and unable to hold back her emotions, she hugged her father tightly. Thinking, "I finally realized that when I thought that even God abandoned me," before saying, "Everyone, thank you so much," as a new determination formed in her heart. "I want to live once more. Together with these people, I will live a different life from before." Later at the dining table, her father looked at her gently and said, "You're looking much better. Do you feel better now, Tia?" And she replied, "Yes. I'm sorry for making you worry, Fath, Papa," surprising even herself as she thought I didn't know that he would like being called Papa so much. While he smiled and said, "Anyway, I'm relieved. By the way, Tia," she answered yes, and he asked, "Can you tell me what happened at the temple?" leaving her at a loss as she thought, "Well, what can I possibly say? I died when I was 17. Because of treason. And then I opened my eyes to find out I'm 10 years old again. They're all just memories in my head about the things yet to come." Before he continued, "While you fainted, God sent a new oracle. The royal palace was quite busy thanks to that. The oracle granted you a new name." Making her heart race as she thought, "A new name that was given to me by God. That means Aristia La Monique." And then he added, "And so, the emperor wishes to see you," making her inwardly panic as she thought, "Oh dear, so this was the reward." And he said, "You haven't been to the palace in a long time. Do you remember?" Soon after, they arrived at the royal palace, the place she only remembered with misery and dismay, and she trembled as she thought, "The royal palace, where I only remember misery and dismay. I'm scared." Her body shivering uncontrollably until the Marquis called out Tia, yet her fear only deepened as she thought, "I feel like I can hear the mocking laughter already." Suddenly, he lifted her high into the air, causing her to cry out, "Ah!" while the soldiers reacted in shock. "Huh? Commander," gasp, and everyone flinched at the unexpected sight. Embarrassed, Aristia pleaded, Please let me down, Papa," but he calmly replied, "It's not that far, so stay still," while she thought, "But everyone is looking this way soon." They stood before the emperor and bowed as both said, "Greetings, Your Majesty, the sole son of the empire. Greetings, Your Majesty, the sole son of the empire." Before the presence of the 33rd emperor of the Castina Empire, Mirkan Luciana Castina. and alongside him stood Duke Arcant de Ras, commander of the First Night Squadron, who said, "I was hoping to discuss some matters with you all," and Duke Ruth de Verita, the Chancellor, added, "How convenient, since we're all here now." As the Marquis respectfully said, "We await your word, Your Majesty," and Emperor Mirkan declared, "I feel there are still those who wish the demise of this empire, so we must be prepared. As such, I was thinking of increasing the numbers of our soldiers and knights," repeating his intent firmly. But Arcant reacted with concern. "What? Recruiting more knights is already trouble enough, but increasing taxes on top of that? Your Majesty, why do you always harass me like this?" "What did I do?" While Mirkan complained, "Whenever there's a new policy like this, I'm the one who gets harassed by all the nobles. This one here is too loyal and says yes to everything," repeating his frustration, and, though reluctant, Arcant finally said, "I'm sure there will be opposition, but all right, if His Majesty thinks it's fine." At that moment, Aristia's heart sank as she thought this won't work. In the past, this policy, it eventually failed and even led to a riot. The increased taxes became a burden for the common people instead of the nobles who should have paid, though. But before she could process further, the emperor suddenly said, "I would like to hear what the young lady thinks of this matter," leaving Aristia completely shocked as all eyes turned toward her. Emperor Mirkan looked at her with interest and said, "I have heard much about your bright mind, Lady Tia. So, what do you think of this policy?" And Aristia immediately realized the situation as she thought, "I see. They let me hear this on purpose. Duke Ruth is a wise chancellor. He would know the problems in this policy. Yet he's staying quiet because the emperor is testing me. I already stand out because of the oracle. If I stand out any more than this, they will become more wary of me. But..." And despite the risk, she stepped forward and said that policy should not be implemented, Your Majesty, causing Duke Arcant to question, and why so? To which she firmly replied, "Because the empire is expected to go through a severe drought soon." Then she continued, "The empire suffers a severe drought every 30 to 40 years. The sign of that coming drought is the below-average harvest that precedes it for years," while deep inside she thought, if this policy is executed, the people of the empire will suffer from starvation for years. I know it will happen, so I must stop this. And she concluded, "And this year is the beginning of the signs," making the emperor turn to Ruth and ask, "What do you think?" And Ruth calmly answered, "What the lady has mentioned is true. There are signs of a drought coming starting this year," leaving Mirkan to murmur. However, increasing the military power of the empire is still necessary, as Aristia's mind raced in panic. Thinking, "How will we do that now? I've already spoken too much, and I can't turn back." In the past, the second son of Duke Ruth came up with a new policy. I am truly sorry for him, since he was later recognized for thinking of this policy. But I must think of the people who might starve, and with resolve, she said there is a way. By taxing luxury items, tax luxury items that are not a necessity but used by nobles, the merchants will sell the goods for a price that includes the tax. And in turn the throne can collect those taxes from the merchants, making Ruth's eyes light up as he said, "I see. The lady's suggestion is great, Your Majesty. Luxury items are better for showing off the more expensive they are. If we tax luxury items as the lady has suggested, we will be able to collect the funds without much opposition," and satisfied, Mirkan declared, "Very well. Come up with a detailed plan and execute the policy," to which she bowed and said, "Yes, Your Majesty." Then he added, "I am truly amazed to see how brilliant you are in person," and she responded, "I am honored, Your Majesty." But then his tone shifted as he said, "Lady Tia, I wonder why you didn't speak your full name just now. You know what the meaning of the name is. Did you choose not to speak it because of the eyes here?" Leaving her confused as she hesitated. "Please, I do not understand what." Before saying no, of course not, yet Mirkan pressed further, "You are a brilliant young lady. Do you dare to say that you really don't know that a middle name from God means a right to inherit the throne?" And in that moment, Aristia realized the truth as she thought the emperor was no longer looking at his son's future wife. He was looking at his son's rival, the stake of an emperor. His hostile eyes looked so much like the eyes from someone in the past. And Mirkan continued, "You knew that I was testing you, so why didn't you ignore it?" While Arcant added, "Your Majesty, if you feigned innocence and foolishness, perhaps you could have avoided my suspicion." But Aristia stood firm and said, "That I couldn't back down for the sake of my own safety when I knew the people of the empire were at risk, though inside she feared the consequences, thinking a sudden appearance of a possible heir to the throne who is not a royal, perhaps the emperor is considering, to banish me, or even House Monique. Yet Mirkan suddenly laughed lightly and said, my, looks like I've frightened the young lady too much. Do not fear, I don't think of you as a threat to the prince. This throne isn't something that can be taken simply with a name. I didn't raise my child to be such a fragile person, prompting Arkant to shout, Your Majesty. Why did you hold such a grave mood if you weren't going to do anything? And Mirkan replied calmly, Why did you hold such a grave mood if you weren't going to do anything? If I were you, I would have feigned innocence this moment and sent word about the drought through more elusive means before turning back to Aristia and saying your heart is too soft and kind to be a ruler, leaving her stunned as she thought I have a kind heart. I've never heard that in my life. I was always told that I'm a cold, objective person, and he continued, an emperor must take care of oneself in order to lead the empire, and so someone who willingly accepts danger is not fit to be a ruler, however. Making her ask, however, and he finished, your kind heart and brilliance that thinks of the people of this empire are perfect as an empress, and that makes me very sad this moment, causing Ruth to question, Why do you say so, Your Majesty? You all know very well why. And Mirkan explained that child grew up as the one and only heir to my throne, and because of that, he has to be the center of attention at all times. You're a brilliant young lady who was given a name by God, if you were to be praised, prompting her to interrupt, Your Majesty. But he continued, I wonder how that arrogant child will respond. At that same moment outside, a soldier announced, Your Highness. Welcome, Your Highness, lesser son of the Empire, as the Crown Prince Ruv arrived and said, I am here to see the Emperor. But the soldier stopped him, Your Highness. I beg your pardon. The Emperor has forbid anyone from entering at the moment. Leading him to ask who are in the audience hall right now, and the soldier replied Duke Ruth, Duke Arkant, Marquis Kyrian, and his young daughter, making Ruv realize they are discussing something important enough to forbid any entry. So why is that? Child allowed in there while I am barred from entering, and with growing irritation, he turned away in anger, thinking, right, it's not like this is the first time. Back inside, a soldier nervously said, I beg your pardon, Your Majesty. And Mirkan simply responded, Go ahead, tell me what you think, as Aristia clenched her fists tightly, her heart trembling with old memories, thinking father has always been strict to me, yet he always treats that child dearly, and with quiet determination. She finally spoke, I do not wish to be involved with the prince in any way or matter. Outside the hall, Duke Ruth spoke with admiration, saying, Your Highness, have you heard about Lady Tia? She's only 10 now, but her accomplishments are outstanding. Her etiquette and studies are all perfect to be the partner of a good ruler. And hearing this, the Crown Prince Ruv let out a cold scoff, saying, while inside his thoughts darkened as he thought, Lady Tia. Everyone is praising that girl wherever I go. You should just announce her as your heir instead of me. Back inside, Emperor Mirkan turned to Aristia and asked, You don't want to be involved? Why is that? While her father called out in concern, Tia, and Aristia's mind raced as she thought, I have no choice here. I can't repeat my life from the past again. Gathering her courage, she said, You can't send a girl with a right to inherit the throne to marry a different family or to another country. Yet you're worried about the future. If you announce me as the future empress, then aren't you planning to welcome me as a future queen? And Mirkan calmly confirmed that is correct, making her think bitterly, like father, like son. How can they be so alike? As Duke Arkant questioned, but you are the foretold partner in the oracle, are you not? While the Marquis added, We cannot be certain whether I am truly the mentioned partner or not, and Aristia explained the oracle mentions the birth of a girl. However, we do not know whether that birth means born at a moment, or if the girl is still in her mother's womb at the time, repeating her reasoning carefully, while inside she thought, right. It's certain, because the foretold partner is not me. It's the girl loved by the god Vita, a girl who appeared from another world. I was born the year after the oracle. Jun is a year older than me. The oracle was referring to her, but nobody will believe me even if I say that now. And so she bowed her head and pleaded, Please, give me some time. Your Highness, I will find another solution. Then added, if the matter is not urgent at the moment, it is better to step back and assess the situation in order to strive for the betterment of both parties. You've taught me this just a few moments ago, Your Majesty, and regardless of what you choose, I know I will remain the future wife of the prince for a while, causing Mirkin to pause and say, so you've predicted even that, while Ruth silently admired her, thinking what an amazing child. She even surmised that there will be strife among the throne and the royal factions in such a short time. If the engagement is broken now, people will speak of a disagreement between House Monique and the royal throne. And that will be a perfect excuse for the noble faction who oppose the royal throne. And Arkan too thought Kirian sure has an amazing daughter. Finally, Mirkin declared, good. The prince will have his coming-of-age ceremony in a few years. I will wait until then, while thinking this child is only 10. She will grow to be an enviable, brilliant young woman. Later, as everything ended, Aristia let out a quiet sigh and said, phew, that was exhausting. I don't think I'll ever get used to His Majesty's imposing aura. My back aches from being so nervous back there, though worry still lingered as she thought I've bought some time, but I don't know how long this will last. What should I do from now on? As she wondered, she suddenly found herself standing before a familiar large tree, her eyes widening as she thought this place is. And she quickly muttered, I have to go back, reminding herself it was a habit of mine to walk this place when I'm thinking. I can't be here, what if? What if I, panic rising as she thought, what if I run into someone here? She called out cautiously, who's there? Her heart pounding as she thought, in a place like this, what if I run into? When suddenly a cold voice answered, this is the Emperor's garden. This place is not open to just anyone. And the moment she heard it, her body froze as she thought, I can never forget that voice. Slowly turning, she saw the prince and trembled, thinking Prince Ruvlis. Why did he have to be here? Fear overwhelmed her as she thought, oh no. I can't let him see me. He'll definitely get mad at me. What do I do? But his sharp voice cut through her panic. Do not hide and show yourself. How impertinent. Did you not hear me? And inside she screamed, oh no. I need to avoid him first. Don't come here. Please don't come this way. But as the wind suddenly blew her cap into the air, she cried out, ah, and Ruv recognized her instantly. You're the daughter of Marquis Kirian, making her heart sink as she thought that cold voice. He stepped closer and asked, your audience with the Emperor is finished? Why won't you say anything? You're being rude. I'm sure you know who I am, so why are you behaving like that? Yet she couldn't respond, her body betraying her as she thought, my mouth won't open. My hand, my body, they won't move. And as he grew more impatient, he said, are you not going to answer me? While she trembled helplessly, thinking I can't even, and finally, his voice hardened with displeasure. How disrespectful of you, as she struggled desperately, telling herself to turn away from his gaze. Ruv's voice turned sharp as he said, how absolutely insolent you are, and without waiting for a response, he continued, you think you can keep your head high simply because everyone praises you, before finally concluding, well, fine. I see there's no point in speaking to you any more than this, and just like that he passed by her, walking further away and leaving Aristia frozen in place, while her mind suddenly drifted back to memories she could not escape. Recalling his cold past words, lick my shoe. You are nothing to me. Your father is dead. The memory striking her like a blade as she stood in silence, and the scene shifted as she once again found herself in a quiet room reading when a knock came at the door, making her ask who is here, as Lena answered, it's Sir Alendis de Verita. I showed him to the guest lounge for now. How should I proceed now? And Aristia froze as she thought, Alendis de Verita, the younger son of Duke Ruth de Verita. In the past, he came up with the luxury tax and became renowned as a young genius. He was one of the famous people in the empire along with the master swordsman, Carcian de Ras. I heard he was smarter than his own father. He invented and improved several policies all by himself. I've never met him before, but I was always amazed at his talent that surpassed his renown. But now, such a person is here to see me, not my father. Panic rising as she thought, oh, when I went to the palace last time, I suggested his luxury tax to the emperor as if it was my idea. What if he already thought of the tax at this age? And what if he's here to question me about how I knew it? Be calm, Tia. Nothing is certain yet, and gathering herself, she stepped forward to meet him, saying, "I've made you wait." "Greetings, Sir Alendis." "I am Aristia La Monique," and he politely replied, "Greetings, Lady Aristia. I am Alendis de Vita." As she offered, "Please, have a seat," while observing him closely and thinking he has emerald eyes. The eyes of the Vita family bloodline, I think. He was 3 years older than me. And he spoke first. "I'm sure this must have been a surprise for you. I should have sent word beforehand, but I couldn't wait any longer." And she replied, "I see." Before he cut straight to the point, "Actually, I am here to ask you a question, Lady Aristia." Making her tense as she said, "What is it?" And he asked, "Do you know about the new policy that will take effect soon?" And she thought he's getting to the point right away. I should act like I've at least heard of it instead of feigning ignorance. While he added, "You mean the luxury tax?" "I've heard of it from my father. I think it's a tax for luxury items that nobles purchase." "You think? That's odd. Do you not know about it? Aren't you the one who suggested it?" And she panicked. "That's thinking so this is it." He knew everything from the beginning, before admitting, "Yes, it's true, I did," and immediately spiraling inside, "What should I do?" In the end, it's true that I used another's idea as if it was my own. I must apologize, but instead of anger, Alendis suddenly lit up and grabbed her hands, saying, "I knew it. My guess was right. I heard you just turned 10 this year. You must be a true genius." I'm so amazed, leaving her completely stunned as she stammered, "S, sir." While mates quietly watched the scene unfold, and he continued excitedly, "That's so formal. You can just call me Alendis. May I call you by your name as well?" "Aristia. I haven't met any peers who I can talk to on the same level. I feel like I can discuss things with you," and she thought his smile is so bright and genuine. Before he added, "So, try calling my name now," and for the first time she felt something unfamiliar, thinking nobody has ever smiled like this for me, before finally softly saying, then, Alendis," and gathering courage, she asked, "How did how did you know that I suggested the luxury tax?" And he happily explained, "Oh, that? My father started reviewing that policy one day after he came back from the palace." He looked really serious, but I've never seen him study anything like that policy before. "So it's easy to assume that someone suggested it at the palace, right?" And she replied, "That's true," while he continued, "Yes, yes. And that day, he praised you. My father is very stingy on approval, so I rarely hear him praise someone. But that day, he couldn't stop praising you for a while. It was like you were his own daughter," leaving Aristia stunned as she thought, "So he wasn't here to accuse me. But still." And finally she said hesitantly, "Actually, the luxury tax isn't my idea." Alendis suddenly asked, "What do you mean by that?" And Aristia quickly panicked and said, "Well, I read it from a book," making him pause as he asked, "Really? What was the title of the book?" And she nervously replied, It didn't have a title. I found the book by chance in the royal library, but when I tried to find it again, it was gone." While inside, she thought, I can't tell him that it's his idea from the future, and he simply hummed, "Is that so?" making her heart sink as she thought, he seems disappointed. I suppose we won't be calling each other's name now. He only did that out of respect since he thought the policy was my idea," while he calmly sipped his tea and said, "I see. So it was from and she continued, thinking I was so flustered by his friendly attitude just a second ago, and now I feel disappointed too. The heart can be so fickle." Before she softly said, "That's how it is, Sir Alendis," making him pause as he replied, "Wait, what's this? Perhaps you thought I would take back my offer of calling each other casually because the policy isn't your idea," and she flustered, "Oh, but he immediately continued, "It's not important who thought of the idea first. The point is that you confidently spoke your thoughts in front of that scary emperor," before stepping closer and saying, "I've taken a liking to you. Either way, I understand that you're bound by certain circumstances, so here's my suggestion. When you are freed from those circumstances one day, will you marry me?" And Aristia's mind exploded in shock. "What?" while he casually added, "So, how about it? I'm quite the catch, you know," still holding her hands as he continued, "Well, you'll learn more about me in due time." And she thought, the genius of the century wants to spend time with me and even proposed to me at our first meeting? What is going on? "Someone, please tell me what's happening," before he tried again, "So, what do I?" But she firmly decided not ever Just then Marquis Kyrian arrived, making her shout "Afe, father," as the Marquis said "Tia, come here," and Alendis greeted him respectfully. "Greetings, Marquis Kyrian." While the Marquis immediately questioned, "Isn't this the first time you've met my daughter?" Proposing on the first day doesn't seem plausible, but Alendis confidently replied, "I fell for her at first sight," shocking Aristia as her father asked, "You are only 13 this year, are you not?" While Alendis boldly answered, "Love is not restricted by age, is it?" leaving Aristia panicking as she thought, "Wah, what should I do? I don't think I can interfere between them." Then the Marquis said, "Sir Alendis, I am not here for idle chatter," but Alendis replied, "And I am not joking here, sir. I have eyes and ears as well. I know that there's a possibility that Aristia will not become the Empress, and what will everyone think if the engagement with the royal throne is called off?" And the Marquis answered, "People will whisper that perhaps the daughter of House Monique has a fault." Before declaring very loudly, "I will not stand and watch nor allow that to happen," making Aristia think father, while Alendis continued, "How will you stop nobles from talking to each other? After the engagement is called off, House Monique's reputation will plummet, and what's more, only second-rate and good-for-nothings aiming only for the title of Marquis will begin to circle her." As Aristia held her father and thought, "Father will be humiliated because of me. I didn't think that far ahead." Then Alendis asked, "What do you think, Marquis Kyrian? If you would allow me to, I will become a good shield when the time comes, as son of Duke Ruth. Our families are on the same side," while Aristia softly called out "Father," and the Marquis finally said, "My daughter's opinion comes first and foremost." And Alendis agreed, of course. Before the Marquis concluded, "Fine then, if you say so. I will approve of you as her friend, and not her fiancé, but only if you pass my one condition," making Alendis think condition, before suddenly shouting, "If this is bad. I need to be strong enough to defeat not just one knight, but a whole squad. I'm doomed," surprising Aristia, who giggled hee, and he immediately panicked, "Don't laugh. Our family has been bad with the sword for generations. My father and brother are both bad at dancing or sports. I didn't even try because I thought I would shame myself," while she calmly said, "I see why House Vita has a lot of civil officers instead," and he complained, "If you didn't suddenly propose marriage out of the blue, then this wouldn't have happened." Before quickly apologizing, "I'm sorry, Aristia. I've made a deal without even asking your opinion first," and she replied, "I accept your apology," making him brighten up. "Thank you, Lady Aristia," while she thought, Alendis, he's polite and kind, as he declared, "Now then, I'll have to train hard starting tomorrow. I have to be acknowledged as your friend for now," and Aristia thought, he seems like a good person, while he raised his voice to celebrate, "To our new friendship, Aristia. I know we'll be just fine," repeating it again as if sealing it with joy, and for the first time she felt it too, thinking a friend, someone who can stand with me on equal grounds, and now I finally have one too, before she finally smiled and said, "Yes, I think so too." In the royal palace, Heron approached Prince Ruv and said, "Your Highness, here are all the books you were looking for. The rest seem to be at the West Library. Shall I get them?" But Ruv only responded with a distant ah. As servants and maids passed by, greeting him politely, "Greetings, Your Highness, future son of the Empire," and then whispering among themselves, "That surprised me. I ran into him this morning too. I didn't think he would still be here. Let's come back later," making Ruv pause and ask Heron normally, "A noble that visits the royal palace wouldn't forget my face or not know about me, right?" And Heron immediately replied, "Of course. Not just the nobles. Anyone who enters this place surely knows you by appearance alone." So Ruv asked again then, "Why would someone refuse to greet me and instead stare at me without a word?" And Heron nervously answered, "Pardon? Haha, that can't happen. It's impossible to enter this palace without any etiquette. Who would show such disrespect in front of you, the prince?" But Ruv simply said, "Right," while thinking, "So that girl did simply ignore me. How impudent." As elsewhere, Aristia wandered through the training grounds searching for Alendis, thinking, "Is Alendis not here yet?" Noticing how crowded it was as she strained to see the back, when Sir League approached her and said, "Lady Aristia, good morning," making her panic as she thought, "Oh no, who is this?" And he continued, "What brings you to the training grounds?" And she hesitantly replied, You are, sir, league, surprising him as he said, "I'm honored that you remember me," while knights around them called out, "It's been a while, my lady." "Welcome, my lady," overwhelming her as she thought, "Ion Hokya. Everyone. Good morning." Panicking internally, I don't know who any of these knights are, and Sir League politely asked, "Are you here to see the commander?" "He's not here yet. May we help you with anything? Would you like to wait here?" "You came here early in the morning last time too," making her freeze as she thought that embarrassing memory, and he added, "Did you have a nightmare? Then are you all right today?" Pushing her further into panic as she thought that time. "I'm so ashamed of that morning. Everyone, please forget about that. I cried so loudly in front of everyone." But Heron gently replied, "Yes, my lady. If you wish, we will be careful not to mention it from now on. Though, we don't mind seeing you like that, my lady." And she quickly said, "Please don't mind it too much," while he offered, "If you wish to observe, please take a seat here." The morning sun can still be harsh, and for the first time she thought they all seemed to be good people. Just then Alendis shouted, "Aristia, good morning. Are you here to cheer for me?" And she smiled nervously, saying, "Your training starts today, right?" "Do your best, Alendis," while he enthusiastically replied, "Yes, thank you. I'll have to work hard to be your to be your friend," causing a brief commotion as Heron called, "Everyone, gather around," and Aristia stood beside Lena as she observed quietly, thinking, "Knights, shields that guard the Empire." While Heron explained, Marquis Kyrian is the commander of the second squad of the Castina Empire, and she thought they are the shields that guard the Empire under the Lord's commands, before Alendis began showing off during training in front of her, only to suddenly freeze as Marquis Kyrian arrived and ended the display. And later that night the Marquis came to Aristia's room and knocked, where she greeted him, "Father, have some tea," and he thanked her, "Yes, thank you," before she finally gathered courage and said, "Father, I have a favor to ask," and he replied, "Go on," and she declared, "I wish to learn how to wield a sword." Aristia thought, "I wish to learn how to wield a sword," and her father immediately responded, "You can't even run without a fall. How will you hold a sword?" "I don't recommend it," but she insisted, "But I really want to learn," and he warned, "You were born with a frail body. Harsh training will only strain you even more," yet she pleaded, "I'll work really hard. I want to overcome my weak physique. To build up my strength at least, please? Can't there be some way I can learn?" Making him pause before asking, "Before that, let me ask you one thing. Tia, does it have anything to do with the prince?" Referring to Ruve, while she froze and replied, "That's," thinking it's true, "but I can't tell father about all that. About what I went through before, and how I already died once. He wouldn't believe me." And he continued, "Tia, perhaps, did you remember something from before?" Shocking her as she thought, "What? Remember? About what? What is father asking me about? Does father know my past? Right? I might not be the only one to return from the future. If father remembers the miserable past, just like me, then what must I do?" But he clarified, "About when you were little," and she blinked in confusion. "When I was little," realizing he meant something else as she thought, "Oh, he's talking about something else." Phew. Then she said, "What do you mean when I was little?" "I met the prince for the first time a few days ago at the palace." "Then I suppose not." "Never mind what I just said." And he finally asked, "So then, what is your reason?" And she blurted, "I don't want to get married, father. I just want to stay like this and live happily with you, Papa," instantly panicking as she thought, "What did I just say? At this rate, I didn't just turn back into a child's body. Even my mind is becoming childish. How could I say something so childish?" But instead of scolding, he gently called, "Tia, come here," and she stepped forward and hugged him as he said, "I thought you were all grown up now, but you're still a baby. Right. If that's what you wish for, let's do that. But I am a strict teacher, so prepare yourself." And that night ended softly with her saying, "Yes. Yes, Papa." The next morning, Lena greeted her cheerfully, "Good morning, Aristia," and she went down to the garden where Alendis greeted her enthusiastically, "Hello, Alendis," and he immediately asked, "Are you here to cheer for me today as well?" But she shook her head, "No, not really," making him realize, "So I was wrong," before she added, "I'm going to start training today too," and he burst out, "Really?" Hugging her in excitement as he shouted, "Wow, this is great," while the knights stared in disbelief, thinking, "Why that little fool?" And he continued happily, "Then we can be together every morning from now on," making her panic. "Alendis, you should let go first." While she thought, "Alendis, he must have been nervous all by himself here." "Right, I'm really nervous too," as the knights froze in awkward silence behind them until Marquis Kyrian arrived, stepped in and separated them by holding both their shoulders, saying, "What are you doing, Sir Alendis?" And he quickly explained, "I didn't mean anything more, sir. I was just happy to learn together with Aristia." But the Marquis shut it down enough. "You can start by running 30 laps. Tia, 10 laps for you," shocking him into silence as he thought, Under everyone's stares, Alendis awkwardly laughed and said, "Looks like I'm not very welcomed at the moment," while Aristia worried, "Will I be able to finish 10 laps? Struggling as she ran, huff. He encouraged her, "You can do it, Aristia," while she gasped, "My legs are going to give out." At the same time, at the Ras estate, Duke Arkant returned home where his wife greeted him. "Oh my, what's this? You've come unusually early today," and he replied, "I'm back, my dear. I want to spend some time with my dear wife once in a while," making her tease him, so smooth with words. "Yet you always neglect me otherwise. Before asking, I heard you had an audience with the Emperor. Is he in good health?" referring to Emperor Mirkan Luciana Costina, and he answered the same as ever. "He's always been strong. Though, he seems to miss his younger sister that he hasn't seen in a while," surprising her as she said, "Really? How unusual." And he added, "Of course, you're the only family His Majesty has left," before suggesting, "How about visiting the palace sometime soon?" And she replied, "Well, I do wish to. But I'm busy these days, and my body feels heavy." But suddenly the door burst open and Mother appeared, making Arkant freeze as he shouted, "Mother! Mother!" Arkant shouted loudly, asking if his brother was back yet, saying he had promised to buy him a new horse to ride, but his mother immediately corrected him, saying, "Sane, a duke's son shouldn't be so inelegant," while Arkant's wife gently reminded him to mind his manners, just as Sane suddenly shouted in excitement, "Oh, you're back, father," prompting his mother to ask if he was even listening to her at all, to which he quickly replied, "Yes, I'm sorry," before his father calmly explained that Kajin would be late today, but had sent the horse ahead, so it should be arriving soon. Hearing this, Sane excitedly declared that he was going to welcome it now, saying he couldn't wait and wanted to see it immediately, rushing off despite his mother sighing in exasperation and calling him a child, telling him not to run inside the house like that and reminding him not to speak so improperly, before suddenly shouting, "Stop, Sane! Sane!" Carcian de Ras, while his father, watching the scene, thought to himself that she had quite a temper too, "My dear," before remarking aloud that it was good the boy was healthy, though his liveliness might be too much to handle. To which she replied that it was because he took after a certain somebody, leading him to suggest that it might be better for him to visit the palace and be a playmate for the prince, asking if she didn't think so. Which made her pause before asking if he was actually suggesting that. And he calmly explained that she was the one and only royal princess and younger sister of His Majesty the Emperor, which made her the prince's aunt, Ernia Shauna de Ras, first princess and Duchess Ernia, and that since Sane and the prince were practically cousins, there was no need to be wary of disapproving eyes, asking if that wasn't true, though she sharply questioned who exactly was being wary of whom, while he simply concluded that if that wasn't the case, then visiting the palace once in a while should be fine later. As Ernia walked through the palace hall, she thought bitterly to herself, "Ugh, that snake. He's starting to take after my brother. He knows everything. Yet he says something like that. Have Sane spend time with the prince? That won't do, cousins or not." When suddenly Rove greeted her, saying, "Duchess Ernia," making her think here he comes, before she politely greeted him, calling him the dear prince and future son of the empire. And he responded that it had been a while and asked what brought her there today, to which she explained that she was now an outsider as a married woman and had simply come to see how the family was doing since she hadn't visited in a long time, adding that she wouldn't stay long, but he told her not to put it like that, assuring her that his father would be delighted if she visited often, prompting her to thank him for his kind words before asking if he had finished reading all those books, remarking that the history books were known to be difficult even for grown-ups to comprehend, to which he replied that he had always been reading them, while Sane added proudly that with this, the prince had finished all the books in the royal palace, leading her to say how amazing though. She thought to herself, well, before adding aloud that in terms of simply reading words, that was, causing the prince to respond that she need not hesitate if she wished to say something, but she feigned politeness, saying, oh no, how could she dare do such a thing? Though he reassured her not to worry, reminding her that she was in fact his aunt, Duchess Ernia, and hearing that, she finally spoke frankly, saying then please excuse her as she would share her opinion as his aunt, criticizing him. By saying that to think he would be satisfied just by finishing those books, she could not hide her disappointment at his laziness, dear prince, which caused Sane to shout in protest, only to be stopped as the prince calmly asked, is that how I seem? And she answered yes, explaining that at his age, His Majesty had excelled not only in books, but also in strength and physique, and had always said it was nothing special, especially for someone who would rule the empire. Adding that it seemed he still had a long way ahead of him, especially if he did not wish to tarnish the reputation of the late Empress prior, saying she would only be proud in the heavens if he worked hard, before continuing that in any case, he was the only child and heir of His Majesty now, though she casually added that it was probably fine, mentioning that the young lady from House Monique, who was to be his fiancée, was quite amazing, apparently the one who suggested the luxury tax, and that His Majesty must be relieved to know such an excellent empress would support him in the future, saying it must be quite a relief to know, after which Sane tried to comfort the prince, saying, my prince, please don't mind that, you're already doing more than. But the prince suddenly shouted that she said it's not enough, before Sane quietly admitted that there was not even a single day when he was not compared with her. Elsewhere, Aristia trained with a wooden sword, shouting hup, hup, while Alendis watched her and thought to himself, what is the difference between her and I? What makes her so different? While practicing, Aristia suddenly cried out in pain, saying ouch, which made Alendis immediately rush to her side and ask what was wrong, Aristia, and she explained that her hands were stinging, prompting him to tell her to take off her gloves, only to gasp softly upon seeing her condition, saying, oh no, all your blisters opened up. How did you bear with this until now? It must have hurt. Just as Lena hurried over in panic, calling my lady and insisting she needed treatment right away, but Alendis gently intervened, saying, oh, I'll do it. Here, give me your hand. Warning her that it would sting, but asking her to bear with it a bit more, to which Aristia quietly replied all right, before he suggested she take a break from training while her hands healed, as Lena stood nearby, blushing while watching them. Yet Aristia firmly refused, saying, no, I can't take a break. Just for this, surprising Alendis, who remarked that she was suddenly even more energetic, reminding her that she had collapsed after running only 2 laps just a while ago, to which she playfully replied, you too, Alendis. As the others muttered pathetically weak stamina, before Aristia excitedly revealed that it was actually because her father had given her a sword, making Alendis react with surprise, asking, really? The Marquis? And she nodded happily, saying yes, although it's a sword for children, but it was the first time her father had given her anything, so she would have been happy no matter what it was, which led Alendis to comment that she really liked Marquis Kyrian, didn't she? Leaving him momentarily confused as Lena suddenly shouted loudly at Sir League, asking if he had seen their lady's hands, and how he could make her train until her delicate hands turned into such a state, but League responded calmly that it was normal in the beginning, explaining that the blisters would burst several times, and she wouldn't be able to handle a sword properly until they turned into calluses, insisting that of course her hands would be hurt from training, and that was why he hadn't wanted her to start in the first place. While Lena argued back that their lady's health had always been delicate since birth and questioned how he could make her train like others who had always been healthy, but League firmly replied that It was because the commander had ordered them not to go easy on her, which only made Lena call him stubborn and cruel, asking if he was always like that, to which League retorted that a knight who protects the empire cannot go soft and easy, angrily adding that if boiling would soften someone, then she needed 10 more days in hot water, causing Aristia to step in and calm Lena, telling her not to get mad, while Alendis echoed the same, and Aristia gently reassured Lena that she was all right, explaining that she had started this because she wanted to, apologizing for making her worry and thanking her, which moved Lena to tears as she cried, "My lady," lamenting how such a young and delicate lady would put herself through such hardship before hugging her tightly and declaring she would ask the chef for an extra special nutritious meal, when suddenly a loud scream echoed, Aya, making League shout what's wrong, as Heron rushed in saying someone had been injured during practice, and that both the commander and captain were not there, prompting Aristia to quickly order Lena to call the doctor. Hurrying to the injured person and asking if he was all right and how deep the wound was, while he weakly replied, "I'm fine. This is, ugh," as League instructed to stop the bleeding first, and Aristia, seeing the severity, worriedly asked if he was really all right since he was bleeding so much, while he groaned in pain, and she urged him not to move, though he insisted he was fine and it was nothing, but she reassured him that a doctor had been called and asked him to bear with it a little more, telling him he must wait inside the mansion first. As in his fading consciousness, everyone imagined Aristia as an angel, while she gently encouraged him to return to the arms of Vita with her, and the injured man, overwhelmed, thought he was being welcomed by an angel, causing her to panic and cry out, "Kaya, please hang on." Yet he weakly murmured that he had had a good life. Later that day, as he rested in bed, he told the doctor that he had seen an angel, to which the doctor dryly replied to hang on because it was too early for that. While Aristia reflected that she hadn't known people could get injured like that during training, and Alendis responded that indeed, asking if she had been surprised, before reminding her they should finish treating her hands as well, making her suddenly realize she had forgotten in the commotion and thank him, saying she was all right now, but he pointed out that her gloves were worn out and offered his own, saying they were sturdy and protective and that she should use them for a while, which made her hesitate as she held them and asked what about him, whether his hands were all right, to which he jokingly replied no, not at all, that he felt like he was going to die and his hands were so worn he couldn't even hold a fork properly after training, making her begin to protest. But he cut her off, saying that it pained him more to see her suffer and that it would be pointless if she collapsed before mastering the sword, leading her to softly call his name and say they both had to work hard, to which he agreed enthusiastically, while she quietly wondered how he could be so kind, questioning if she had ever known anyone so considerate before or if she herself had ever treated someone like that, realizing that being considerate and kind had once only been a means to achieve her goals, and acknowledging that Alendis had taught her many things later. As he looked outside the window and saw the snow falling, he called her over, saying, "Aristia, look, it's the first snow," and as she gazed at it, she thought about how it was the first season she had experienced since coming back in time, softly saying it was so pretty and that it was already winter, reflecting that every day felt new and peaceful. When Alendis suddenly asked what she liked, leaving her confused as she repeated the question and asked if he meant a color or food or something like that, but he simply said anything she could think of, and after pondering, she admitted his question was abstract before saying that if she had to choose, she supposed she liked snow, and when he asked why, she first said because it was pretty, then added that it looked warm and soft and somehow sweet, making him thoughtfully repeat white as snow, warm and sweet, which led her to ask why he was asking, and he simply replied that it was a secret. 3 months later, Alendis approached Aristia with excitement and said, "It's my gift, Aristia," making her curiously ask what's this, and he replied that it was the thing she said she liked last time, which made her pause and think, "What I like. Wasn't that already several months ago?" "I think," I answered, "as the snow. Would there be snow in a box like this?" But as she opened it, Her eyes widened in amazement as she exclaimed, "Wow. It's so pretty." Snow white chocolate, and Alendis proudly explained that she had said she liked something white, warm, and sweet as snow, so he made it, leaving her astonished as she said she had never seen this before and wondered if chocolate could really be made in white too. To which he confidently replied that it hadn't existed before, but he invented it, since chocolate perfectly fit the conditions she described, making her think in awe that he had invented this and that he was a genius before. Thanking him sincerely and saying it was so precious she didn't even know how she could eat it, but he encouraged her to enjoy it as much as she wanted because he had one more thing, which confused her until he dramatically declared that the other gift would be him, boasting that his skin was white, his heart was warm and could even be hot at times, and that he was also sweet, calling himself a sweet boy, which made her flustered as she said, "Alendis, you're really..." But he cut in playfully, telling her to say dash, while she protested that she could feed herself and that it was embarrassing, though he insisted, saying, "Come on, just once, think of all the work I did to make this," making her sigh and give in. Thinking he was so sly and that she couldn't refuse when he said that, and after tasting it, he eagerly asked if she liked it, to which she smiled and replied, "Yes, it's everything that I wished for. Thank you, Alendis," while unbeknownst to them, others were watching from behind the door, and she later reflected that this moment was the beginning of everything. That evening, as Aristia entered, she was stunned by the sight before her and asked in confusion, What is all of this, everyone?" Only for everyone to cheer Tata and explain that they were gifts for her because they had heard she liked something white, warm, and sweet, shocking her as she asked how they knew, while they eagerly said they had each prepared something of their own and began arguing over which one she would choose, insisting she would pick their cake, or that a scarf couldn't be sweet even if it was white and warm. While another argued that its color alone made it look sweet and warm, and that white lace was the truest representation of a young lady's dreams, leaving her overwhelmed as she stepped away, sighing "Phew, that surprised me," and wondering how it had suddenly happened, questioning if someone had overheard her conversation with Alendis. When Lena suddenly appeared and called out "My lady dash," popping a party popper and presenting cotton candy, proudly saying it was the masterpiece all the maids had made together because they heard she liked something white, warm, and sweet, and Aristia awkwardly thanked her, saying it was sweet too, right? Only for more servants to rush in one after another, each offering their own version of something white and sweet, making her think in disbelief just how many people had heard their conversation and lament internally that she hadn't even started afternoon training yet but was already exhausted. Just then, the Marquis arrived, calling Tia, and she turned to greet him along with Alendis, asking if he had a safe trip, to which he replied yes, making her think in relief that this would finally be over now that her father was here. But to her surprise, he handed her a gift, saying he had heard she wanted something white, warm, and sweet and had thought about it for a while, hoping it was what she wished for. And upon opening it, she exclaimed, "Wow, it's white tea. Thank you, Papa," though she couldn't help but think, "Oh dear, even father," as Lena then eagerly asked which gift she liked the most and urged her to answer honestly, joined by others insisting she choose one. While the Marquis quietly observed, making Aristia panic internally as she realized this could become troublesome if she said something carelessly, attempting to say just every, but Alendis quickly interrupted, saying she couldn't say something like everything, which made her think don't be so quick to notice. And after struggling, she finally admitted that she truly appreciated all the gifts everyone had given her, but explained that the chocolate had been made by Alendis over months of careful development and that he was the one who first asked her what she liked, concluding that the chocolate, which made Alendis burst with joy, shouting that he knew she would choose his. While the Marquis, Lena, and League all looked visibly depressed, and Alendis excitedly grabbed her hands, thanking her and saying she was the only one who acknowledged his hard work, explaining how hard he had worked with the chef to develop it, as the others watched in fury, prompting Aristia to tease him. saying that he had once been so confident he would defeat a whole squad one day, yet it seemed he had so much free time he could even develop chocolate, which made the Marquis declare he would take that as his wish to train even harder starting tomorrow. Shocking Alendis, as he tried to protest there was a misunderstanding, while League added they would all help train the young Duke and Lena declared they would beat him next year, leaving Aristia thinking in disbelief that they were doing this again next year, and as time passed, it was said that after several years, people in the Castina Empire began giving white chocolate to the person they loved, marking the beginning of how White Day came to be, believe it or not. Later, Lena gently told His Highness he should rest a bit, while Rove noticed Heron holding something and asked what it was, and Heron replied it was chocolate prepared to relieve stress, which made Rove question him since he despised sweets, but Heron reassured him that he had considered that and asked the chefs to make it less sweet. And as Rove tasted it, Heron asked how it was, to which he simply replied it's bitter. Rove stood alone in the garden beneath a tree, quietly rubbing his eyes, when his aunt approached him and gently called out, "Your Highness, it's such a nice day, so why do you look so sad? Would you like to go on a walk with me?" "Well, Your Highness," and after a brief pause, he reached out, held her hand, and softly replied, "All right." And in that moment, as sunlight filtered through the lonely, shadowy branches, he thought to himself that it reminded him of Jeremiah La Monique, a faint ray of light in solitude. Later that night, as his aunt lay weakly on her bed, Rove rushed in and called out, "Your Highness," but she weakly spoke, calling my daughter, "Tia, please I hope, you will take care of her," causing him to panic as he shouted, "Marchioness, with you." But she reassured him faintly that she knew she would be safe, and he desperately pleaded, "Please, wake up. Marchioness Jeremiah." "Marchioness Jeremiah," his voice breaking as others rushed in calling, "Your Highness," while Heron asked if he was all right, to which Rove quietly responded, "Yes," as he suddenly realized it had all been a dream, waking abruptly and muttering that it seemed he had dozed off for a moment, when Heron informed him that the Emperor had sent a message requesting his presence for afternoon tea, surprising Rove as he remarked that his father usually only called him when necessary and wondered what had gotten into him today, though his thoughts drifted back to Marchioness Jeremiah, reflecting that it had already been more than 5 years since then, and she was no longer there, questioning why he had dreamed of such a distant memory. As he walked further, he suddenly spotted a familiar figure and thought, "That's her daughter. Why is she here?" Observing that she looked just like her mother except for her silver hair, which he found almost annoying, even noting that her expression didn't seem to fit her age, and as he approached, he coldly questioned her, saying, "Why have you come here again?" Thinking to himself that she was quite disrespectful and wondering if she dared to claim she didn't know who he was, while Aristia hesitated before softly replying, "Your Highness," which made him remark that at least she was answering this time before asking again why she was there, and she nervously explained that she had come because His Majesty had requested her presence, which made him realize that her father had been the reason behind this unusual summons. Thinking that this explained everything, before coldly commenting that it sounded like this would be an uncomfortable meeting and that a cup of tea should suffice, all while acknowledging to himself that she was his fiancée. As a maid served tea to both of them, Rove silently observed her trembling and thought, why is this child trembling so much? Like a rabbit thrown in front of a predator, questioning what he had ever done to her, when suddenly, in her nervousness, Aristia spilled the tea on herself and cried out, "Ah!" startling the maid. As those around them reacted with visible anger at the incident, Aristia, flustered and trembling, quickly bowed her head and stammered, "Why, Your Highness, I'll take my leave first," before turning away in haste, while Rove silently turned and walked forward, and Heron hurried after him, asking if he had any burns since his clothes had been stained, but Rove curtly replied, "It's fine," though inwardly he thought, how am I supposed to talk with someone like her? She took everything that I couldn't have no matter how hard I tried, and she doesn't even remember taking any of it, while elsewhere Aristia struggled to steady herself, thinking, why can't I calm down? I thought I already accepted this new life. Yet the memory lingered, read, Just like blood, perhaps I'm still not free from the pain of my past, and letting out a small breath, she said phew, just as Alendis approached her cheerfully, saying good job, Aristia, and after exchanging greetings. He noticed her condition, remarking that the heat must have been exhausting for her and that she seemed even more exhausted than him, asking if something had happened at the palace last time, but she quickly denied it, saying no, nothing happened. Though he pointed out that she had been lost in her thoughts all day, making her think why can't you just pretend to not notice, and though he didn't press further, he gently told her it was fine if she didn't want to say anything, but reminded her that she could rely on him whenever she needed someone, because for her, he would always be willing to help, which made her think gratefully Alendis. Thank you, you're such a good friend, really, as he casually changed the mood, complaining about the heat and saying he might faint from dehydration, prompting her to suggest they take a break inside, which he happily accepted, thanking her for the invitation, but just then Sir League called out to her, asking for a moment of her time. So Alendis excused himself to wait inside while Aristia turned to League and asked what it was, and with a serious expression, he warned her not to get too close to Sir Alendis, confusing her as she asked what he meant, and he explained that he was suspicious of Alendis's reasons for training there, and that even though they were of the same faction, Alendis came from a house of officers, which often clashed with the knights, reminding her that political relations could be harsh and that if she let her feelings cloud her judgment, she might be betrayed later, urging her to be careful. Which left her conflicted as she thought what he said is right, but Alendis is, when Lena suddenly chimed in, telling her not to mind Sir League either and warning that he might put her through even harsher training next time, calling him a cold-blooded and merciless knight, leaving Aristia internally torn as she admitted that League was right and that she needed to be careful not to stand out right now. Yet she still hesitated. Soon after, she returned inside where Alendis greeted her warmly, and she responded quietly before praising the tea he had brewed, saying it was the best, which made him smile and say he was glad she liked it, while she thought to herself that Alendis was a genius and that his family had been ministers for generations, and that even though he was training now, in the end he would become an administrative official, just as he suddenly asked what she was thinking about again, making her quickly brush it off before asking him what he wanted to be when he grew up, and after a moment, he admitted he hadn't decided yet, but would probably work as an administrative official, saying that while learning the sword was fun, he found using his mind more interesting, confirming her thoughts as she replied, I see. Though internally, she realized they could only spend time like this while they were young, and that once he grew up and began attending social gatherings, they would eventually drift apart, noticing her expression. He asked if she was disappointed that he didn't want to become a knight, and she quickly denied it, but he teased her, saying she was, and that she felt lonely, making her protest and tell him not to tease her. While she silently acknowledged that Sir League had been right and wondered since when she had started thinking about Alendis so much, deciding she needed to keep her distance from him, trying to change the subject, she suddenly pointed out a book and asked about it, and he recognized it, explaining that it was a story about a lady and her knight's oath from old fairy tales, describing it as a knight's oath to a lady, which made her think about how a knight swore loyalty to his lord and never-ending love to his lady. Though such things now only existed in old stories, and when he asked what she thought about it, she hesitated before saying it all sounded like a dream, thinking that it had nothing to do with her and was merely a fairy tale, but as he softly called her name, Aristia, she looked at him, and in that quiet moment, Alendis leaned closer to her. Alendis softly called her name, Aristia, and she looked at him in confusion, replying Alendis, when he suddenly said that she was quite selfish, catching her off guard as she asked what he meant, and he continued, questioning if she wanted a knight who would only look up to her, saying he hadn't expected that, prompting her to deny it, saying that's not true, but he calmly replied that it wasn't a bad thing, only that an oath of eternal love seemed too difficult. Then began to question. What would happen if two people loved each other but couldn't be together, asking what a knight should do if he fell in love with the same person his lord loved, whether he would break his oath if commanded to give her up or abandon his loyalty for love. And what if that person already had someone they loved, wondering if it was truly possible to keep such a beautiful oath forever, before finally asking what she would do if she were the lady, whether she could choose, leaving her overwhelmed as. She admitted she didn't know and didn't understand something like that, while he concluded that all of it had nothing to do with him now, and she thought to herself that it was just an old fairy tale that couldn't always be beautiful, asking him to stop talking about it as she realized that sometimes Alendis struck right where it hurt the most without warning, and when he casually suggested playing chess, she silently thought she really needed to keep some distance from him, but he quickly noticed her mood and asked if she was upset because of what he said, making her realize how perceptive he was as she replied that she simply had a lot to think about, though she immediately regretted it, thinking it made it sound like she really wanted a knight. And she awkwardly tried to clarify, telling him not to misunderstand and that she just thought it was a pitiful fairy tale, though even she felt it sounded like an excuse. Yet suddenly Alendis brightened and declared he had decided something, saying that if she wished to be a lady, then he couldn't help but do this, confusing her as she asked what he meant, and he explained that while he couldn't become a real knight, he could at least do this much for his precious friend, leaving her startled as she asked what he was doing. But before she could stop him, he solemnly declared that he, Alendis de Vita, would promise to Aristia La Monique to forever serve her as his lady, asking if she would accept his oath. And in that moment, her thoughts spiraled as she wondered why he was suddenly doing this and what he wanted from her, telling herself she shouldn't accept it and that she had to refuse. Yet, as she met his expectant gaze, she found herself unable to do so, despite just thinking she needed distance, and in the end, she softly said "I do," which filled him with joy as he declared he was honored and excitedly said that now she was truly his lady, while she quietly thought that she would just leave things as they were for now, hoping that even if this moment faded with time, she could remember this pure feeling that had long disappeared within her through him a little longer. As he cheerfully remarked that he had first met her last spring and now finally felt like they had grown closer, teasing that she hadn't really grown much since then, which made her retort that the same went for him, and he laughed, repeating her words before noting that they still had years ahead of them, for years until his coming of age. And 5 for her, reminding her that boys came of age at 18 and girls at 16, which made her pause in thought, and as he looked at her, he gently said that he hoped she would grow up soon, my lady. 1 year ago, the Marquis called out to his daughter, saying, "Tia, take this," as Aristia looked at the object in surprise and thought a sword, while he explained that he had it prepared since she would need one as she learned how to wield a sword. And she hesitantly thanked him, saying "Thank you, Papa," while he quietly wondered if she didn't like it, just as the surrounding soldiers began murmuring and then suddenly protested, calling out Commander, and when he asked what it was and told them to speak up if they had something to say, they stared at him suspiciously before blurting out that he had given her a sword for her birthday, pointing out that she was only 10 years old, with Arkant adding that even his own children, who loved fighting, would still ask for something other than a sword, to which the Marquis calmly replied that he hadn't known that and couldn't help it, though it was clear he was being scolded by his soldiers, and he tried to justify himself by saying that she had been training a lot, so he thought she would like a sword, but Arkant pointed out that it was because he had rarely spoken to his daughter for so long, and that he couldn't blame anyone but himself, though he softened his tone, telling him not to be too upset and that he could start getting to know her better now, while the Marquis quietly wondered if perhaps she might secretly like it, not just a little, but a lot, and now, in the present moment, he once again called her, saying, "Tia, congratulations on your 11th birthday," which surprised her as she questioned what, and he reminded her that tomorrow was her birthday and that this was her present, making her think about how it was indeed her birthday. Yet, she had already lived to be 17 in her past life and now found herself holding a doll, something she had never even played with before, leaving her unsure how to respond as he handed it to her, and she thought, what should I do with this? While he assumed she didn't like it and admitted that the knights had said girls her age would like dolls, concluding that he must have gotten it wrong again, but she quickly reassured him, saying, "No, Papa, I really like it. This is amazing. I'm so happy. Thank you, Papa," which relieved him as he said he was glad and then asked if she would like to go outside with him, to which she happily agreed, though as they walked, she could feel people staring at her from behind and realized he had actually brought her to work rather than on a walk, making her internally panic that she should have left the doll at home and that everyone must be staring because she was holding something so childish. Yet when she looked at him and saw how happy he seemed, she thought that maybe it didn't matter after all. Just then Kajin suddenly called out Commander, rushing over and saying they needed his presence as the assistant of the second squad, Kajin Duras, reported that there had been an accident during training and that it had become complicated, explaining that he had done what he could, but there was only so much he could handle with his authority, prompting the Marquis to respond that he understood and would go immediately before telling Aristia to go ahead and wait inside and asking if she knew the way to his office, to which she replied yes and told him to take care, while Kajin added that there had also been an announcement about an inspection that day, and after the Marquis acknowledged it and left, Aristia reflected that he was busy as soon as he arrived, yet he had still prepared a present for her, and then suddenly realized that he had given her a small sword around the same time last year as well, wondering if that had also been a birthday present, and noting that in the Empire it was normal not to celebrate birthdays before adulthood, yet he had ignored that custom twice now, making her heart swell as she thought, "Papa, for me." Hugging the doll tightly and deciding she would treasure it carefully since he had prepared it just for her, resolving to keep it with her at all times and ask Lena what she could do with it once she returned. But in that moment, as she walked, Roof suddenly appeared and accidentally slammed into her, knocking her to the ground, and as she fell, he immediately said, "I'm sorry." Aristia froze the moment she saw him and thought in shock Prince Ruvless, him again, of all people, as Heron immediately stepped forward and reminded her that she was before the royal prince and must pay her respects, prompting her to panic and bow quickly, saying, "Forgive me, greetings, future son of the," but in her nervousness she stumbled and cried out, "Kaya." Oh no, her mind going blank as she thought, what did I just do? And she hurriedly apologized again, begging for forgiveness and saying she had shown such disgrace, convinced he wouldn't forgive her and that he must be angry, because he had always been angry at her. Yet when she carefully looked up, she realized in confusion that he wasn't mad, and instead he calmly asked where Marquis Kyrian was, saying he wasn't inside, to which she nervously explained that there had been an accident during training and he had gone to check, and Ruv simply replied that he would wait since he was already there. Later, as they sat in the lounge waiting, Aristia's thoughts spiraled as she wondered why this kept happening, how she always ran into him whenever she visited the palace, and how the prolonged silence was far too much to handle, silently pleading for her father to hurry, until she finally tried to speak, calling Your Highness, only for him to respond shortly, "HNG," making her hesitate as she thought he might get angry now, but instead he remarked that she still liked those kinds of dolls, leaving her confused as she repeated pardon, and wondered what he meant by still, while he simply scoffed, and before she could ask further, the Marquis arrived and greeted him, followed by Ruth, and Ruv explained that he was there under the Emperor's command to oversee matters, prompting the Marquis to guide him for inspection, while Ruth suddenly noticed the doll in Aristia's hands and commented in surprise, saying it was rare to see her with something like that, noting that she had always been mature but now looked her age, which made Aristia think it was because she had already lived for 19 years, as Ruth continued praising her, recalling how she had suggested the luxury tax when she was only 10 years old and calling it amazing, adding that thanks to her they could prepare for the coming drought in advance, to which Aristia humbly replied that it was good news and that others, or even the prince, would have noticed eventually without her, earning further praise for her humility. Yet as she spoke, she suddenly felt a gaze on her and wondered why he was looking at her like that, while Ruth declared that she was brilliant and a blessing to the empire, asking if he agreed. And Ruv responded with a faint smile that it was quite so and that he was happy to have such a brilliant fiancé, even laughing lightly, but Aristia immediately sensed the truth behind that smile, thinking that it was the expression he wore when he disliked something, and wondered if no one else had noticed the coldness behind it as even. The air seemed to chill around him. Noticing her pale expression, the Marquis asked what was wrong, and she quickly insisted she was all right, though he turned to Ruv and requested permission to leave, saying his daughter had not been feeling well, which Ruv granted without objection, and as they left, Aristia's thoughts churned with confusion and pain, questioning why he always looked at her with such hatred and resentment, wondering what she had ever done to him when he had been the one to torment and neglect her, asking herself why he was the one showing such an expression when she should have been the one to resent him. Later that night, she trained relentlessly, striking a sculpture again and again as she pushed herself, thinking faster, I must get stronger. I must become stronger in order to escape the royal palace. Before June appears in this world, unaware that Alendis was quietly watching her from a distance. But in her haste her foot slipped and she fell, crying out Kaya, and Alendis immediately rushed to her side, asking if she was all right, while she quickly insisted yes. This is nothing. Yet he looked at her seriously and called her name, asking why she was so anxious and saying she looked like someone being chased, which made her hesitate as she thought of course I would look like that. Because I'm training like a mad person afraid of getting caught, but she couldn't say it, and he quietly acknowledged that she still couldn't tell him, though he reassured her that it was no secret she had worked hard, calling her diligent and saying he was sure she would achieve what she aimed for, adding that if she wished, she could rely on him anytime, which made her softly call his name, Alendis, before she leaned on him and thought about how kind he was. Realizing that in the past no one had been kind to her and that she herself had only thought of her own survival, wondering if things might have been different if she had opened her heart back then, and as time passed, the new year arrived, and an opera was held to celebrate Emperor Merkin's 25th year, where the emperor laughed warmly, saying it had been a while since he had watched a play like that and asking how she had been, to which Aristia politely replied she had been well thanks to his grace, and he encouraged her to enjoy the opera, remarking that the Marquis had to watch it alone even though he himself had called her to sit there, making her glance toward her father as she thought of him, while the emperor then noted that her family was quite small, consisting of only her and the Marquis, and when she confirmed it, he spoke of her mother's early passing with regret, saying it was such a pity and that it would have been a blessing if the Marchioness had lived longer, recalling how it felt like only yesterday that he had last seen her, which left Aristia uncertain as she wondered how to respond. Realizing she didn't remember anything about her mother since everyone, even her father, avoided the topic, and she felt no longing because of that, questioning how she had answered such things in her past life before returning in time. But before she could dwell further, the emperor suddenly changed the topic and mentioned that he had heard she had entered the palace looking quite lovely last time, confusing her until he elaborated that she had been holding a doll almost as big as herself, adding that rumors had spread starting from the second squadron, which shocked her as she wondered how even the emperor had heard such a thing, while others recalled the moment fondly, and the emperor laughed, saying he knew everything that happened in the palace and that it was a pity he hadn't seen it himself, before casually mentioning that he had heard she met the prince and turning to him, asking if she had been as lovely as the rumors claimed, and Ruv replied simply that she was, which made her feel uneasy as she tried to understand what he meant, recalling that she had seen that expression on his face before June appeared, when he had been indifferent and only occasionally hostile, not yet filled with the deep resentment she remembered. Leaving her to wonder when everything had started to go wrong and what exactly he had hated about her, before the emperor's voice rose again as the opera reached its climax, declaring that the future son to succeed the holy blood had been born, snapping her attention back as she realized they were watching the play, and as the narration continued, speaking of a holy partner sent by God to accompany him, she was suddenly struck with shock as she realized that role referred to her, questioning whether the emperor had invited her knowing this, while the play continued to proclaim the empire's prosperity and blessings upon the child of prophecy. And in that moment, Aristia sat frozen in overwhelming realization.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope this romantic journey made your heart flutter just like mine. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell so you never miss another love-filled episode. And don't forget to leave a comment sharing your thoughts. I love reading what you think about the story. Your support means the world. See you in the next romantic adventure.